Dice, yeah, ay, ay.
Good day and welcome. I am William, narrator for the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Some stories don't start with a single person, they start with generations. Today's guest, author William Bill Eshenbaugh, grew up on family land that traces back to the early 1800s, surrounded by stories most of us only read about. What began as curiosity about his ancestors turned into a powerful historical novel rooted in the Civil War, family resilience, and the women and men who carried life forward during impossible times. This conversation blends history, memory, and humanity, not as a lesson, but as a lived experience. This is the FYI I Am Damaged podcast. Now a word from our sponsor. Oscar wrote a wonderful children's book called Logan, The Strong-Minded Little Elephant. Check it out.
Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strength in their hearts. Logan, the Strong-Minded Little Elephant by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within.
Thank you for joining me on another episode of FYI I'm Damaged. I'm joined by author William Eshenbaugh. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly.
Yes, Eshenbaugh. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Bill, most of us only visit historic sites. You grew up in the house your great-grandfather built on the family farm that goes back to the early 1800s. As a kid, what did that feel like ordinarily, or did you always sense you were living inside a story?
I didn't think it was special. Our farm has been in our family since the early 1800s, but the families around us maybe came a little bit later in 1850 or even 1900. But I was born in 1942. It just seemed like everything was really permanent. No one sold, no one bought, no one moved in. It was just kind of idyllic, really, for a young guy. I mean, I was born during World War II, but my memories don't start till after, 1945 or 46, something like that. So it was just warm, fun family, community. Everyone went to church on Sunday. Everybody knew everybody. Nobody locked their doors except at night when you're inside. You might lock the door when you go to sleep, but your doors are open all day long. It was just heritage. I never realized it was heritage at the time. I wish I had a higher sense of collecting more information back when I was a young man.
Now, did the whole view of where you lived and how it was maintained, was that it was just a regular to you? Did anything stand out? Was it like kind of like a little awe-inspiring? I mean, you would hear people say after the fact, like, "Oh my God, you live in a place like this," and the history. Was that any like aware to you, or doesn't it was just maybe a regular house?
It seemed just like a regular house. We were one of the best farmers around, so our house was maintained and it was, sturdily built, came from Sears and Roebuck and shipped by rail. So we were prosperous farmers, but town kids looked out on farm boys, so I was kind of a second-class citizen when I went into town. But out in the farm country, we were first class. We were the best of class, I guess would be the best way to put that.
Amazing. Now, three gener restart. 3 generations of your family fought in the Civil War, and you still own pieces of that original land. When did those old family names and stories stop being background and became something you felt responsible to carry forward?
10, 12 years ago, I had a place in Park City, Utah, right across the street from me was a facility owned by the Church of Latter-day Saints of Jesus Christ, the Mormons, and they had established Ancestry.com. It wasn't a big deal yet. I mean, it's probably more than 10 years ago, maybe 20 years ago. But I would go over there and it'd be very helpful to help me fill in research and a family and so forth. And once I did that, then I put together a really big compendium of the family history going back to our first ancestor who came to America in 1740. Oh, that's kind of cool. And I was probably the second or third oldest in our family at the time, with a cousin who's 19 years older than me. He helped me with filling a lot of blanks because he lived through the era before I did. And then I presented him with a family chart and genealogical chart and a 700-page book on the history of the family. He thought that was pretty cool. So I had ones made up for my brother and my two sisters at the time, as well as myself. So that started, and I said, okay, well, how do we carry this forward? And the next step was to do a graveyard crawl. That was put together in a very small book, but about each graveyard cemetery or each grave that I could identify. And we go, here's William Dixon Eshenbaugh, born 1848, blah, 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 served in the Civil War as a teenager, Gwanda Nixon, his wife, and so forth. And I was surprised. I had 40-some relatives come from all over the country, Michigan, South Carolina, Florida, up to Pennsylvania, to do the graveyard crawl with me. We did it, and then we did an old-fashioned picnic at the church lawn, spread out blankets and baskets, and just try to imagine ourselves back before the turn of the last century. And gosh, they loved it. I had 10-year-olds coming to that and 21-year-olds coming down to Michigan going, wow, I'm so glad to connect with my heritage. And so that then started rolling in my head going, this could be a great story to tell. I don't know enough details. I can't call it a historical book. I can call it historical fiction, based on certain facts. And of course, a lot of the stuff in the Civil War is very well documented, but just be able to flesh out the dialogue that I made up. It's just all made up. But I started to admire my great-grandmother, Marianne Dixon. She's at home. Her husband, at 37, rode off to the war. And for the first time, he rode off for a year. He was under somebody else's name. You could take $300 from somebody and take their place on the draft. So he took somebody else's place, got injured, came back, re-enlisted. Wow, for 3 years this time. In the cavalry. I think he got smart. The first time he was in the infantry, and this guy's walked every step. Cavalry, at least you get to ride a horse, and stuff. He went back. I thought, so what? Why would he go back? But more importantly, what's it like for her back home, trying to maintain a farm? And it is not the most beautiful farm you've ever seen. It was hilly and rocky and, all that kind of stuff. How does she maintain a farm, passable kids at home, and not know day by day what's going on with her husband? Maybe get a newspaper once a month or something, or a letter from the front once a month from him. But other than that, how do you go to sleep at night going, well, I know, there's a big battle going on. We've heard about it somewhere, but is he in it? And what's he doing? And did he get hurt? I haven't heard from him. So I started thinking about her, and her maiden name was Dixon. Wow. Next thing I know, she's got a son with a middle name Dixon. She's got a nephew with the same name, William Dixon Eshenbaugh, two of them, the same name, which threw me off for a while in my research. And it came on all the way down to my brother, whose middle name was Dixon. And it all honored this woman. So I got to dig into her character, her soul, as much as I can. How strong does she have to be to have that kind of imprint on people generations later, let alone run this farm, run this family, and maintain throughout the whole war, and to get him back home. And he didn't get them home at the end of the war. He had to go out to Leavenworth, Kansas, and chase Indians for a couple of months on the plains out there. Fortunately, I have no engagements there, but wow, she's stronger than anybody I met in the book, I think. So I just love building a character around her.
Yeah, that's great, because it's people, and all due respect to our veterans, and I have veterans in my family as well. A lot of people don't see the other side of the coin unless you're in it to understand that, okay, if someone's going off to war, whether it's a man or a woman or in the armed forces now, what's the other half of that? Because those individuals who put their lives on the line also need to be supported, and those individuals who do support them in and out through every single thing, like, you're right, they do need acknowledgement, they do need recognition to say, hey, look, that's not easy. That's not easy. And that time, and you can't get an email or a call and say, hey, look, something happened. I wouldn't be surprised if she had if what is this feeling? Like, you have just a gut feeling, like, oh my God, did something just happen? And I couldn't imagine that, you know.
Crazy things I found. It's not in the book because I end the book right after the Civil War, but in 1870, 5 years after the war is over, um, grandfather or great grandfather, sorry, is not in the census. Huh. She's there, has a household. And then I find in research somewhere up pops a little articles. It's an ad from a Boston newspaper written by Marianne Dixon Eschenbaugh, seeking the whereabouts of Andrew Eshenbaugh, last known to be in St. Louis, Missouri, looking for work, but wrote that he's headed home, do not know if by horse, rail, water, or walking, but cannot and have not heard from him. Now, if she ran that newspaper ad in Boston, where else did she run it? He apparently had gone off to St. Louis to look for work. I'm guessing he was fascinated because I believe in his transportation out to Kansas, to Leavenworth, Kansas, to the uh, cavalry attachment and back. I'm guessing they changed boats in St. Louis because it was Missouri, the junction of the Ohio and Mississippi rivers. They probably thought that was a pretty cool city. So 5 years after the war, he goes there for some reason to seek work. I don't know why he wouldn't go to Pittsburgh or, I don't know what was happening back home. But, after most wars, we have a recession. We have to adjust to the economy. So I'm guessing that it was really hard scrabble, come back and, trying to make a living on the farm. Maybe he didn't like farming. That's not unknown either. But off he goes to be a shingle maker or a bricklayer, according to a couple of things I found. But, again, that's not in the book. But, wow. How'd you like to be sitting at home trying to put an ad in the Facebook in Boston, gosh knows where else, trying to find your husband who might be on his way home, might be dead, might have been, who knows what could happen. There's a million things bad that could happen to you, not much good. Try to get back from St. Louis on foot all the way back to Pennsylvania. So I'm just fascinated by that one. That's a chapter somewhere down the road I want to dig into a little bit more.
And it's safe to say that he was literate. He could read and write. And if she's putting out all of these notes in the newspaper, and it's 5 years to say. And nowadays you would be like, okay, hindsight is 2020. Okay, write a letter to your wife, say, hey, look, I'm okay. But then again, I wouldn't even know how is the mail system as it is. Is it reliable? In that sort of sense. Did you come across any of that?
There was a postal system in place, especially during the war, that the government made letters free to soldiers to write home to their families. So there was a postal system. I think Ben Franklin actually established our first postal system. And I'm pretty sure he was literate. We had a school called the West Sunbury Academy that shut down for the Civil War because not only did the professors go off, but the students went off to the war. In those days, education was 8 years. So at 14 you were done unless you wanted to go on. So you went to one-room schools for those 8 years. Then that was it. So I'm pretty sure he did that. I don't know that he went to the academy, but I know that my grandfather and my father both went to the academy. My father had his diploma that was unbelievable in describing the courses he took, Latin and German. And I mean, there's not a high school kid today probably that could get through the courses he took based on what I've just read on his diploma. But once you graduated from that academy, you were then qualified to be a teacher. So that was a pretty cool thing. My little town of West Sunbury, which is a mile from us, it was the first town in Pennsylvania. And I don't know if this means cities or not, but it's the first town in Pennsylvania that had stone sidewalks. They cut stone. They had to pay 3 feet by 3 feet, is my guess, if I remember walking home from school. But they had sidewalks before the Civil War that were solid stone sidewalks. And it's only kind of 200 people or so, but very progressive town in terms of the education, the academy. And the academy reopened after the Civil War and went on for a number of years till it burned down. But just you think about the real literate out there in the hills, but man, they got an academy people come from all over the country to go to.
That's something I would love to see. I love the history, and I may not be too much of an aficionado to know all the details, but it's something appreciative that I think everyone should kind of develop. I mean, it happens when you get older sometimes where you develop where you appreciate where you come from, the history, the sacrifices individuals make, and individuals like you who tell this type of story where it's like, there are families entrenched in this country where, they're putting their lives on the line and, being, citizens and doing everything that they need to be, a good human being in general. and supporting their country. And it's something that I think a lot of people should kind of lean towards. You got to learn your history big time. Now, before you were the guy who wrote the Civil War novel, you were the dirt dog in Florida real estate. How how did the farmer's son and land broker in you shape the way you see war, land, and legacy?
Yeah, I, I've loved the land because we grew up on it. We found arrowheads. My dad tells stories about the Seneca Indians. They believe had an encampment because there were two streams that came together at the bottom end of our farm and all that kind of stuff. So loved the land. In college, I worked in the subdivision a couple of summers, just helping put in ditches and trenches and mow lawns and that kind of thing. Well, seeing land go from cornfields to housing, that was kind of cool. My cousin was doing it, and he was a big inspiration to me. I wanted to be a history teacher until he brought me. He came over one Sunday. He's driving this brand new Buick convertible, and he came over from Ohio to our farm in Pennsylvania, and he said, "Let's go for a ride." So we went for a little ride in this convertible, just he and I. And he said, "No, this is not a conversation I want you to share with your father or your mother. They both want you to go off and be a history teacher. I understand that. We need history teachers. But do you know what a history teacher makes?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, why wouldn't you know that if that's what you want to do?" I said, "Well, that's a good question, but all my teachers in school wear suits, have a car, have a home." He said, "Yeah, but they're used cars and they're small homes, right?" And I said, "Maybe. I don't know the answer to that question." He said, "Well, I checked. Your school district made, I think it's 3,600 is what a teacher makes out there. $3,600. Now, this is 1958 or 59, someplace in that era." Okay. Well, that still seemed like a lot of money to me. And he said, "Now, cannot tell your dad this." He said, "But do you know what I made last year in real estate?" He said, "I've got a home building company. I have a siding company that sells siding all over the place to these World War II vets. I've got a real estate brokerage firm." He said, "Don't tell your dad this, but I made over $100,000 last year." I said, "What?" He said, "Think about that. That's the career earnings of a teacher. Teacher teaches for 30 years at $3,000 a year. That's 90,000. So do the math. It's just a little over $100,000 a year I made last year." Oh, okay. My eyes about letting that be around. And he had gone to Penn State and graduated before the World War II. He inspired me. I'd gone to Penn State on some 4-H trips, loved the campus, but had no aspirations to go there. And he then conspired with my father behind my mother's back to have me go with my father one night to a Penn State open house. We filled out some forms in October of my senior year. I never thought too much about it. I was accepted at Slippery Rock State Teacher Scholar. I was going to be a teacher. And on the day of my prom, my acceptance letter to Penn State arrived. Now, there were no SATs back in those days. There were no interviews. That one night in that application form was it. I got accepted. And so I went to my senior prom. I'm like big man on campus, man. I'm going to one of the best schools in Pennsylvania. I'm going to a big time school. Everybody else, you guys can all go to your state teachers colleges, man. I'm top dog here, man. So he had a big influence on me. He helped me in many ways to figure things out in life. He was my not so much my career coach as my mentor on a personal level throughout. And I was at Penn State. I didn't have any money. A check was $50. He'd show up. He and his wife would come up for the weekend. That was a 4-hour drive, and they come up, take me to dinner, teach me how to use a fork and a knife, and not order a steak that was completely well done and charred. Maybe try medium. Have escargot. What escargot? This thing is growing in our garden. Just helped me in a long ways to go from being a kind of a clodhopper farm boy maybe to being a little bit more sophisticated. So, but the love of the land stuck with me. I always liked it. I ran a trucking company for a number of years in my career. Well, first of all, I lent money on houses. My first job, the house was $10,000 or less, and it was just a process. I learned to go out there and figure out how to do it quicker than anybody else in the company. I had a couple little secrets that I didn't share with the company about how I was getting things done. I get paid on production, right? So, for example, employment verifications had to be mailed away. You wait for somebody to fill them out and come back. I was a young son of hire. There were only 3 employers. The 3 steel mills were the big employers. So, I'll go down there and see if I can't meet some maybe nice young woman in human resources. I don't know what you call it back in those days, but whatever. And explain to my dilemma to her, I need these employment verifications returned for her employees. I pretty soon had a system. I drop them off on Monday and pick them up on Wednesday. build out, maybe a box of candy here and there, a couple of little things just to juice the skids a little bit. And my production was 2 to 3 weeks faster than anybody else in the company. Everybody else worked 9 to 5. I'm a farm boy now. In the summertime, I'd go out and look at houses at 6 o'clock in the morning, Youngstown. It was bright daylight, yeah. There's nothing wrong with that. Other than you had to worry the sheriff coming to arrest you for burglarizing the house, maybe. But I'd go look at these houses, I'd measure them, do my reports. I worked Saturday mornings. No one else did any work on Saturdays. They didn't come near the office. So I'm turning out 2 or 3 times more loans than anybody else in the whole Northern Ohio district. And I didn't tell them I'm working those kind of hours. I didn't tell them how I just got it done. I said, I don't know, just things seem to work well for me. So I got a couple of promotions. I got a couple of pay raises because of my productivity, and that was kind of fun watching these cornfields in Ohio become subdivisions and homes, and go by there the week of Christmas and see lights in the windows. You go, oh, this is pretty cool. This is the American dream, So that helped inspire it. And then I spent 16 years in the trucking business. And while that doesn't seem to have anything to do with real estate, we got into building warehouses on water ports, on the rivers, on the lakefronts from Baltimore to Chicago, because if we controlled the warehouse, we controlled the trucking in and out probably. So it's just a really great way to expand our business. And doing those, I learned how to do industrial revenue bonds. They were tax-free bonds, great instruments to finance them, buy the properties. These are all old industrial properties. I learned very quickly, you better figure out what the environmental damage might have been there. This long before the EPA was requiring it. But, somebody had lead here or somebody had arsenic. We better make sure we're buying something that's not pig in a poke for us. So I learned that early due diligence without any instructions other than Cousin Wally saying, you got to be careful. I don't know there's a handbook on this, but here's some of my experiences and things to look for. So, again, just that real estate experience led to great experiences doing it. And dealing with and going into Cicero, Illinois, and background of some of the mob guys there and all the kind of things that you told about, crooked politicians or crooked contractors and so forth. You had to be on alert, man. You just had to, wow, where's this person coming from? What are they asking for? Are they trying to bribe me? Are they wearing a wire? I mean, I ain't that worried about that. Just getting Cousin Wally said, some of these guys might be trying to set you up. They might be wearing a microphone. And, oh, holy smokes. Wow, yeah, so that's, thank you. Okay. Well, that's a good question. I think it was the evolution of my grandfather, Will, who's a teenager. Um, he, and then again, going back to his mother, Mary Ann Dixon. And every time I turned around, Mary Ann Dixon kept kind of coming into my research and becoming a factor in the names and everything else that I mentioned a little bit ago. So I really try to get a handle on her strength and her challenges and her questions. So that I hadn't thought about her much until I started writing the book, and that really became a focus for me. My dad and I would work together. Think about this. Our farm was still using horses in 1945, and I was 3 or 4 years old. It was not till about 1950 when the war was over and the factories had converted back to making farm machinery, where we were able to buy tractors and combines and balers and all that kind of stuff. So we were in 1947 or 48, as I'm 6 or 7 years old, we're still farming like they did in 1890. Old equipment, all that kind of stuff, or basic equipment. So it was an evolution for me to think about the family and the changes going on in this whole family. I mean, my father born in 1892, lived in 1990, so 98 years old. And you think about what he went through. And I didn't put him in the book because he was born after the war, but you think about his born in 1892 with nothing but horses and a dirt road. And by 1990, we've put a man on the moon and all great stuff we've done in this country. And, we had iPhones, by the way, we had iPhones, but we had email and on a basic level, and cell phones on a basic level. So it was pretty astounding. And he kept up with it. I was like, holy smokes. I'm not sure with AI coming on the horizon. That's my biggest challenge today. I'll be 84 in June, but I said, holy smokes, man. Some days I'm just like, good God, how does somebody my age make it through the day if you don't have some literacy? Just in today's world. I mean, go to McDonald's and try to order something. Nobody wants to talk to you. They want you to go and do some kiosk. I was at McDonald's the other day. I perfected my order at a kiosk. Then it asked me my table number. Going, table number? I don't have a table yet. Yeah. So I stand and look around. There's a table right beside it. 162. Yeah. So, okay. I mean, it seemed like the cart before the horse in technology sometimes, but I just don't know how somebody my age who hasn't stayed with it gets through the day. It just, the challenges that come up. I tried to log in, for example, on my computer here at home for this interview, and my computer's a little bit older, and it told me that my Chrome version was out of date. I need to update it. I tried to update it. It's not available on this old Mac I have here at home. But, great, you know. For the one of a nail, kingdom was lost, right? So I was able to, of course, do it. I'm on my iPhone here with you. So it's just those little challenges every day that today's world brings. And I think those people back then, they had challenges, but it was something you had to fix yourself. You couldn't call somebody to come do it. You couldn't find somebody to do it. You're out there by yourself. You better have the jack of almost all trades.
Okay, there we go. And I apologize because I don't know if the couple of minutes prior to me doing this, it might not be on the record, but that's okay. That's only a couple of minutes. All right. So please, by all means, please continue.
I think the thing that surprised me so much was the sense of really being on your own in the 1860s in Western Pennsylvania. Rural, not a lot of people, farmers mostly, men off to war, not a lot of men around. So the sheriff's department was pretty light-handed and 10 miles away. You had to go get them. You can't exactly pick up the phone and call them, back in those days. So you had to take care of yourself. If somebody came around your property or you had a dispute with somebody, you better work it out and better figure it out. And I didn't think about it being quite that Wild West, but it was the Western frontier almost. Certainly before the Civil War, Western Pennsylvania was being settled. Still had stories that my dad told of his grandfather that they had a big bear hunt one time in the 1830s. That there were so many bears and you plant crops between the bear and the deer and the raccoon and everything else, they eat your corn before you try to get it up. So they organized 2 teams of 30 men each, and went out, and each team shot over 3,000 critters in a week. Everything from, I don't know, probably from a raccoon to a bear. But that's a lot of shooting with a gun that you have to prime and pump and all this stuff in one shot. That's some pretty good shooting for 30 men. That's 100 critters per hunter. And it's hard to believe. I don't think I go out today with my 44 Magnum rifle and harvest 100 animals in a week out there. Of course, a lot more pressure on the animals today, but they might not have been quite as afraid of guns today or then as they are today.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've walked the battlefields your ancestors rode from Gettysburg to Winchester to Shenandoah Valley. Can you share one moment on the ground that changed how you wrote a scene or understood what your great grandfather lived through?
There were 2 at Winchester. And there were 3 different battles at Winchester. My great grandfather and grandfather were in the 3rd Winchester, shared in the third and last Winchester in September 1864. And their commanding officer actually got the Congressional Medal of Honor for the charge up the right side of the Union lines against a very fortified Confederate dug-in position at the top of the hill. And they got it. They took it. So I walked up that hill going, God almighty, how much this have been? And you've got people dug in, veterans up there. They've been around a while. They know how to load and fire pretty quickly. And you're going uphill against them. And you think about that. Even in a snowball battle, you want to be the uphill guy, not the downhill guy, right? So how intimidating that must have been. So that one got me. And the other one that got me, not featured very much in the book, but my great-grandfather, William P. McNabb, had enlisted in 1861. He's in infantry. He has nothing to do with the cavalry. But he makes a charge at Spotsylvania Courthouse. Early dawn, May 1864, the whole Confederate and the whole Union Army is pushing hard going south. So they make a charge on another dug-in Confederate position. He's a private. and he goes up the hill and is mortally wounded. He's shot. He goes back to Washington, D.C. by rail because they were pretty advanced communications and transportation by then for the Union Army. Take him back to Washington, D.C., and a month later he dies in the hospital. And one more month later, he'd have been discharged. He was that close to having his 3-year enlistment in. He'd been through some really serious stuff at Gettysburg and Antietam. And here he is at the little Spotsylvania courthouse, gets mortally wounded. And I walked that hill. I went after before dawn, got out of my car and tried to imagine where he was and going up that hill as sun came up, and there were diffs in the terrain. So sometimes you could see the objective, sometimes they couldn't see you. You're kind of in a diff, and you came back alive. What that must have been like to have a one-shot rifle, a gun in your hand, knowing, and then I fire this one against somebody who's behind a fortification. I got to stand up and reload this thing and ram the rod in there and try and get reloaded. It had to be terrifying. I don't know where they got the courage.
Yeah.
Where he got it.
Yeah. One ancestor survived cavalry service, another died in Andersonville prison. How did holding both survival and tragedy in the family line shape the tone of the book, especially when you were writing Danger and Loss?
Yeah, I didn't try to over-glorify those who survived. I think I talked about how they answered the call to duty. Around the campfire, they had a discussion. We never had a resolution to it. Were they there for the preservation of the Union? Were they there because they were anti-slavery? Or were they there for the $12 a month? And we don't really answer that question, but those could have been some of the stimuli to put them there to begin with. But, I can't imagine. The great-grandfather that died at Andersonville, he, again, in his late 30s enlisted, had 6 or 7 children at home. He enlisted on leap year day, February 29th, 1864. He's captured in April of 1864. You think about it, transportation to Washington, get some train, and down to the battlefield. That was the first battle of the Wilderness, was the first battle of Sherman's campaign when he was in charge in 1864. He was a really green trooper, maybe with other green troopers, don't know for sure. But he was captured, maybe first or second day in battle, kind of guessing from what I can put together, and shipped to Andersonville. And of course, Andersonville is a tragic story. It was a starvation, overpopulation, disease, no food. And according to his death certificate in August, he died of a combination of starvation and dysentery. He was buried there and then reinterred back to Pennsylvania after the war. But holy smokes. And then I found some of his children, by 1870, 5 years after the war is over, they're in an orphanage in Mercer County, Pennsylvania, which I lived there for 20-some years. I don't know where that orphanage was. It was long gone. It was in the same township where I worked for 20 years. So, wow, holy smokes. I had no clue, back in those days. But you think again about it. I thought it was tough on my grandmother Dixon. Holy smokes, what's going on with great-grandmother Campbell? I know they were on a much poorer farm than we were. They were not very good farmers from the generations I saw of them. They were not the quality farmers that my dad was. So on a really poor farm, bunch of kids, husband leaves in February and is dead by August, captured in April, dead by August. Wow. And then your kids are in an orphanage. That'd be tragic,
Yeah, it's very tragic. Let me see. Hopefully I'm pronouncing this correctly. The Moravian. Thank you very much. I'm usually good at pronouncing things, but that one kind of got me. All right. The Moravian roots in your family came with strong abolitionist and equality teachings. How did that religious and moral background help you imagine why ordinary Pennsylvania farmers like Andrew choose to fight? And how does that nuance some of your modern assumptions about Union soldier motives?
I didn't know much about the Moravian background until I again started doing this research and found the first ancestor came from Germany with 19 disciples as part of the parade of Moravian missionaries to Pennsylvania to establish a church in Bethlehem and Nazareth, Pennsylvania. And he that one left the church after a few years. He there got into a dispute over how the new church should be built and left the church. But the teachings, I think, were inherent. I never heard my father use the N-word growing up. Most people did, but I never heard my dad do it. It was just everyone was equal. Yeah, blacks who happened to be African American. They treated him the same as they did anybody else. that my dad was a superintendent of a coal mine in World War One, and most of the guys working there were Hungarian or Italian descent. And I've heard others reference, you know, pejoratory, derogative names for those organizations, those guys, or those people. My dad never did. He was superintendent of mine, and it's just, I think the heritage that came down was subtle but strong, that everyone's equal. So I wasn't taught everyone's equal, but I knew it from what my dad said. I went to high school. We had a few African American players and black players on our football team, but a couple of them worked different summers on our farm, stayed on our farm, ate at our table. I slept in the same bed with the guy all summer. You know, he's just a worker like I was, basically, and a good guy. I had some comments when I went back to school in the fall. You had that guy at your house, you know, and calling him names. I don't know what you're talking about. He's a great worker, you know. So it was a heritage that was subtle, but deep, I guess. My dad was, someone said my dad was over religious, but he was a pretty straight laced guy. Didn't drink. You know, just went to church occasionally, but just a strong moral guy.
I think it's great that, you know, even back then you have those individuals that can push that forward of treating people. I forgot who said that, just on the base of their character rather than judging them just on the color of their skin, their background, religion, everything like that. I mean, it goes back all the way before that time, but it's good that, you know, your dad can, as you said, your dad or your grandfather, your dad, right?
That was my dad taught me that. Yeah.
Yeah, that can uphold that sort of thing within himself, and, you know, put that onto you as well. That's a great thing. Now,
Pretty conservative. They were formed 100 years before Martin Luther tacked his proclamation on the door in Germany. They were persecuted by the Catholic Church. The founder of the Moravian Church eventually was hauled down to Rome, tried as a heretic, and burned alive at the stake. So there was, you know, there was a lot of fear when Catholicism would show up in your neighborhood. Maybe that's not where they wanted to be. So they fled eventually to Saxony in Germany, where there was a German count that owned thousands of acres of land. He welcomed Quakers, Moravians, anyone who was seeking religious purity or religious pursuit of their own outside the Catholic Church. But in Saxony was a kingdom, and it had a Protestant king. That was great. He died, and the new king was Catholic. And my ancestors go, Ruckrow, you know, they said, I'm out of here. And one of the targets of the Moravian Church was Pennsylvania, because it had freed slaves, runaway slaves, and it had Native Americans, all that they thought were people that were not being embraced by any churches. They should go to Bethlehem. And of course, the religious name Bethlehem, and Nazareth was the next religious town. Go there, embrace these people, bring them into the organization, and they were very successful. They went from there to North Carolina. They're still a very active Moravian church. And all across the Caribbean and back to Africa, among the black followers, Moravian church is still fairly strong today. Not much here. I looked it up to see if there's one near me. I've got to go to Orlando, a 2-hour drive if I want to go to service. And, you know, there's only a couple in the state of Florida. So it's not a very big religion today, but the Moravian church had a real strong influence at this time.
I got to look that up. That's an interesting story. Now, the Shenandoah campaign doesn't get the same attention as Gettysburg or Antietam, and yet your story lives there. What do you wish more people understood about why that valley, those raids, and those small communities mattered so much to the outcome of the war?
The importance of the Shenandoah Valley. It was a breadbasket to the Confederacy and the Confederate Army. And the Confederate Army reigned up and down that valley. And there were a lot of farmers in that valley who were Amish or Mennonites. They didn't subscribe to War and Edith side. They didn't enlist. All they did was make money. They raised good crops. It's a very rich valley, but they raised good crops, and they sold it to the Confederacy. They sold it to the Union. Whoever bought it from them, they were farmers. And so they were unscathed. But war's going on. Yeah, so what? Yeah, we saw the cavalry ride by yesterday from the Confederacy. So what? And when Grant took over in early 1864, Grant said, "Okay, we're not going to do like the Union generals ahead of me. They would have a big battle like Gettysburg, then they'd rest for 2 months before they have another one. have Antietam, which was a disaster. Even though the North claims victory, more people were killed and injured in Antietam from America, and of course both sides were American, on one single day than Normandy. I mean, it's unbelievable the bloodshed at Antietam in one day. But then they'd rest. Well, that was not Sherman's mode. Sherman said, "Look," Sheridan, Grant, U.S. Grant, who's commanding general. Grant said, "We're going to Richmond, and we're going to burn. We're going to go through the wilderness. No one thinks we can do that. We're going through the wilderness, which is a disastrous place to go through, but we're doing it. We're going all the way to Richmond, and we're going to burn a 100-mile path if we have to, all the way down to Richmond." And he said, Sherman, when it comes to Sherman, across Atlanta, all the way to South Carolina, was the same thing. We're burning everything on our path. We're taking everything. If we can't use it, we'll burn it, destroy it. They would tear up railroad track, and they called them, what do they call them? Yankee bow ties, I think was the name for it. Or Pennsylvania bow ties, one or the other, but they would pile the ties up, set them on fire, and then take the rail, put them on there, and take 2 mules when that rail was red hot in the middle, and tie the mule to each end of the rail and take it around a tree and turn it into a big knot. So the South couldn't reconstruct that back into a tie right away, or into a rail right away. So it was a destruction of all resources that were supporting the South. It was unheard of in the South. I have friends here in the South whose family were on the other side of the Confederacy, and they said, "Billy, how would it like to be a Pennsylvania barn burner?" I said, "Oh, yeah, somebody had to do it, So I guess I was. That was the nickname given to Sherman's cavalry, the Pennsylvania barn burners. They came down to the valley and they laid waste everything. Took all the livestock with them they could take, burned houses, burned barns. They meant to win that war, and they meant it was all-out war, not sort of a genteel war that we fought a battle and then we all rested for a while. Yeah.
Now, we're living in a time of heated debate about history, memory, and monuments. From where you stand as a descendant, landowner, storyteller, what do you think we get wrong most often about how people remember the Civil War?
I think it started out to be a war to free the slaves. And that was an economic factor. But I think it started out to preserve the Union. That was Lincoln's call to arms. And the North was offended that the South wanted to leave. And there was a big call to arms. And I think a lot of guys went because it was $12 a month. Yeah. But they had a lot of immigration coming in. The Irish really were grabbed up big time in New York and Pittsburgh and cities where they had landed and drafted into this army or put in this army or paid in dues to come to the army because they couldn't find a job. So I don't know that we can say, yeah, we all went off to war to free the slaves. But I think it evolved, and especially for Northerners troops who saw slavery and its ramifications and how they lived and how they were treated and so forth as they moved south. I think in your mind you start to say, this isn't right. This isn't right. It's not just the $12 a month here. It's not just to preserve the Union. I think we're doing the right thing. I think that's the evolution that happened that I don't think it's talked much about.
No, I agree. It's a fair point. It's a lot of people normally stay stuck on one thing when they need to understand that even things like that can evolve and not just stay, hey, I really believe that. Now, your book deals with a family divided by war, violence close to home, and the shock of Lincoln's assassination. When you look at today's polarized climate, what echoes do you hear and what hopes do you take from your ancestors' experience?
Obviously we were very divided back then because you had brother against brother in some families and death on both sides, maybe. So we're politically polarized today, but they were pretty politically polarized then. The South thought they were being victimized by tariffs and victimized by the money in New York and trades and all the industrial might of the North. The North felt like they should be more in charge, perhaps, because they were generating a lot more of the economy. And there were, so you had the moral factor. There were abolitionists. There were states that started long before the Civil War to abolish slavery and started in New England. Pennsylvania was one that joined in the fray to abolish slavery. So there was an evolution going. So I think we had economic and we had emotional, we had racial issues all coming together that much more intense, I think, than what we have today. I mean, today, you think about what it would have been like back then if they had 24-hour day major networks. covering that war. Oh my goodness, it's just the whole perception of it would be much different because you'd have to put up with the perception of the networks and the broadcasters, whatever they perceive the world to be. I think the newspapers probably did a pretty good job of editorializing as well. Just be my guess. Look, I haven't delved in that too much, but I have a sense that the newspapers in New York versus the newspaper in Atlanta had a lot of different editorial columns in them, I believe. Yeah. So I think we had a hard time after that war. We had 10 years of Reconstruction in the South, where the federal government occupied a lot of places. There's no government, so the federal forces stayed on for up to 10 years. There's still, you talk to a 6th or 7th or 8th generation Floridian, there's still some hard feelings about how Reconstruction was handled. And I think that got exacerbated by Lincoln being assassinated just a few days after the end of the war. I think Johnson, that replaced him, was not as friendly to the South as Lincoln might have been. I think Lincoln would have worked harder to restore the Union. You just think about the Grant's surrender conditions with Lee. Take your horse, take your gun, go home. Yeah, they'll give you a pass. You're out of here. We're not arresting Robert E. Lee for tyranny or treason, leading a revolution against our country. Go home. Go be a head of a university. Yeah, there was a good reconciliation going on. I'm not sure what reconciles where we are today. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate, and it gets exacerbated by the quick churning of people's opinions online, and as soon as something happens, case in point, what's happening right now in Venezuela, where things happen, and I'm not going to do a deep dive into that or anything like that, or give my opinion, but as soon as it happens, as soon as these actions are taken, you have people with their opinions and already saying, no, there's no evidence or this or that or this, that, or the third. And that's okay. But the quick outrage, I think, kind of takes away of people being able to digest what is actually going on. What's the history? Learn about, everybody wants the quick answer, the quick solution, the quick opinion. And I think something like that really needs to kind of be taken back so that individuals can say, hey, like, what's the long story here? Like, we have our ancestors, whether it's recent or far back, they had to digest everything and learn everything and not jump to conclusions. But that is like totally opposite today. And yeah, I mean, do you have an opinion on that?
Yeah, it's just a little example for you. Several boats have been blown out of the water, allegedly drug dealers coming out of Venezuela. I'm a fisherman. I'm pretty sure those aren't fishing boats. There's no tower. There's no rods. It's an open cockpit with a bunch of blue drums. I don't think they're fishing. But some media would have you believe those are just innocent fishermen out there in the Gulf. Now, if I were a drug runner, I think I'd put a tuna tower on my boat. I think I'd put rods on it, occasionally have a line in the water. So I'd look like a fisherman. If I'm going to get 4 motors on the back, you don't need 4 motors on the back to go fishing.
Very true.
Yeah. So, so the media would have you believe those are fishermen. And my eyes are going, you got to believe me, believe your eyes, or you going to believe the newscaster here. Yeah, come on, man. So we get an awful lot of spin on it that you have to digest and work your way through, or just ignore one or the other. I mean, I saw something yesterday that when I first heard the news on Venezuela, and about the 3rd or 4th person I had opinion started railing on Trump and Ukraine, going,
yeah,
wait a minute, yeah, what? Come on, man.
Yeah, that's like an argument with my ex-wife. It's like, okay, why are you bringing up other things? Let's stick to the point.
Yeah, exactly. Perfect. Exactly. Yeah. No. That's a good example.
Now, for listeners who have old family stories, letters, or half-remembered tales, what's one way they can start turning that material into something more, whether it's a written record, a project, or even a better conversation at dinner time?
Absolutely. I just started to write it since I realized I was getting close to being the oldest surviving member in the family. So I started to write it using Ancestry.com to write the family history and write a little story about each person. It wouldn't just be, a box on a chart to go, oh yeah, Andreas, 1710 to 1767. So what? Yeah. let's tell a little story about Andreas. How did he leave Eschenbach in Bavaria, the town of Eschenbach? How did he get to the ocean? How did he get across the ocean to London to register? How did he get from London to Philadelphia? And how did he get from Philadelphia up to Bethlehem? I mean, that's a couple hundred, that's 100 miles or more just there, you know? How did he do all that? Why did he do all that? Just start looking at your family a little bit and just make some notes. Just make it for yourself so you can keep track of what you've learned maybe. And, you know, take each person, trying to flesh in what you can find about that person, and then start to flesh in how's that person related to other people you've found, you know, and maybe some of your conversation I would do this. If you have an ancestor who's older, been around, whether they're literate or not, go sit down with them, record what they have to say, ask them, tell me what it was like, Grandma, when you were 7 and you came from Lithuania. How did you get here? Do you remember? Do you remember how long it took? Do you remember your parents? What did they do in Lithuania when you were a little girl? When you landed, did you land in Philadelphia or New York? Do you remember getting admitted to the United States? Do you remember where you lived at all? You know, just flesh it out while you're still alive. It's nothing more valuable than giving you some good starting points. It might not always be true because your memory might be faulty. I wish I had spent more time with my dad recording stuff. I was fortunate that as a young man on the farm, and when I would say young, 16 or 17, on certain days of the year, we had to go make fence. It was mend the fences after the winter. And that just meant the two of us packed a little lunch, went around the back of the hill, and we worked all day digging post holes and setting new posts. But all day long, we talked. And he'd talk a lot about, see over there, that big scar in the side of the hill? Yeah. He said, that was a coal mine I tried to start. It looked like there was some coal outcropping there. He said, I dug down here for months, you know, when I had spare time. And he said, but I only found a vein about 18 inches high, and I couldn't crawl in there on my hands and knees and mine it. I had to have 36 inches or more to make it worthwhile. So I didn't mine it. That's why there's that long scar on the side of the hill. Oh, yeah. Well, I don't think I have a great nephew today who would have any idea what that long scar was for, but I do, you know. So that's the kind of history that you need to accumulate when you can from people that can help you with it.
Great answer. Now, when a reader closes up the Shenandoah, what do you most hope stays with them about courage, ordinary people in extraordinary times, or the way one family's story can illuminate a whole era?
I think the connection back to Marianne Dixon at home, being the matriarch of the family, and the men going off for the call to war for some reason. I don't know if I've still answered why I think they went, but you know, what motivates a person to go off for 12 hours a month? I don't think it was a lot of money even back then, but did you go for the money? Did you go for the glory? Did you go to preserve the Union? Did you go to free slaves? So just trying to think about what character that took, what strength that took. Sleep on the ground. The one trip they made on a raid where they slept on the ground, and after riding for 30-some hours, it snowed on them. And first of all, it rained all night on them. Nobody has a waterproof poncho, right? You got a big wool coat. You think what that wool coat weighs after riding all night? It has to weigh 50 pounds, right? You get off, you lay down on the ground, you're dead tired, you hold on to your horse rein so he doesn't run away, and you fall asleep, it turns to snow, and you wake up. How do you just not have pneumonia from that? Yeah. How do your joints not just hurt? Mine have hurt most of my life from being too cold. How do you have the courage to do that? What makes you get back on that horse and not just desert and go, I'm going back to the farm, man. I'm not doing this anymore. It's just the ability to persevere in the harsh conditions of the weather and not a lot of food, and somebody wants to kill me. Well, I'm either. There's just a lot of courage. How do we find a moral compass today to do that, do the right thing, and make the sacrifices? It's pretty tough.
Yeah, that resilience those individuals had, it's almost superhuman. It's something to be admired. And thank you for putting that, up front in your book and everything. And finally, where can listeners find the book, connect with you if they want to learn more, whether they're Civil War buffs, family history enthusiasts, or just readers who love a good grounded story?
Appreciate that. Just go to Amazon and put in my name, or put in, which is Bill Eshenbaugh, or put in Up the Shenandoah. Just so your readers see it. Here's my book, okay? But put that into it. You can order it. You get soft copy, hard copy, or Kindle version. We haven't come up with a recorded version yet. I just talked to a company every weekend. It's like, oh man, I got to go to a studio for a week. It's about $5,000. Going, holy smokes, man! The outflow never ends when you get a book going. So we don't have a recorded version, but the other three, I'm getting really great comments. If you look on Barnes and Noble or on Amazon for the reader reviews, it's really beautiful. So
I'm definitely gonna get my copy, and trust me, I echo that sentiment about. I never knew how much it takes to put a book out, and I put a children's book out, and I'm like, wait, I got to pay for what? And I got to do this. I got to put it in another language, and it costs how much? Like I said, it's a children's book, and but it was a labor of love, and so trust me, I understand how that process is, and but I'm glad you put it out there. I'm glad we can take all this in, and now it's part of history, and I'm gonna get my copy. I'm gonna read it, and I I just can't wait. And thank you, sir, for your time. Thank you for your story and for blessing me with this interview. I really appreciate it.
well, I appreciate it. Yeah, great questions. One led to another. Yeah, if you notice, I had to stop and think about certain questions. Go, wow, no one's asked me that one. Yeah, that's the good questions. You did your job. You were ready, and I appreciate the opportunity to be on here. And have a great 2026.
Thank you very much, sir. You as well. Take care.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you, Oscar. That was a wonderful episode. Bill is such an exceptional guest. His book Up the Shenandoah is a must-get. If something stayed with you today, that's the power of story. Bill reminds us that history isn't just dates and battles. It's ordinary people making hard choices, holding families together, and finding courage when the world feels uncertain. His work invites us to look at our own roots, listen to the stories still alive around us, and honour the strength that quietly passes from generation to generation. So take this with you. Your story matters, your history matters, and understanding where we come from can help us move forward with clarity and compassion. Adelante, siempre, por tu mente. Forward, always for your mind. This is the FYI Am Damaged podcast.
Meet Logan, the strong-minded little elephant who learns that bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about believing in yourself even when you're scared. In this beautifully illustrated story, friends follow Logan through a colorful jungle as he learns to calm his worries, take deep breaths, and remind himself, I am strong, I am safe, I can do this. It's a story that helps kids, and maybe a few grown-ups too, find courage, mindfulness, and strength in their hearts. Logan, the strong-minded little elephant, by me, Oscar Luna. Available now at all major retailers and my publisher's bookstore, Milton and Hugo. Because it's up to every parent to show that their child deserves to know that strength starts from within.